Hey there, Happy New Year and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 30 of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. And we're going to do some building, we also have some fan art once again. All in all, it should be a lovely episode. Before we jump in though, I want to answer one quick question regarding mods that I have received numerous times over the last few weeks. Because yes, I present this as a vanilla playthrough, but I do have 3 small mods installed. None of those are anything special though, it's just the ability to automatically toggle lights on and off, as well as the Minify Everything mod and the color-coded mood bar. I will leave some links down below so you can check those out, but again, if you want to play along, they are far from necessary and really only serve as small quality of life improvements. With that being said, we are starting things off today with a troublesome message, as Steak here suffers from food poisoning, something that already happened in the last episode as well. And just to be on the safe side here, we will go with a recommendation that I also found in the comments of the last episode. I think it's best if we throw out the entire batch. There is a solid chance that more of the meals in there are contaminated, and even though we don't have any rice or potatoes at the moment, we do have some meat, so let's make a few meals out of that. However, of course, only after checking that the kitchen is thoroughly cleaned. A few hours later then, Red Hawk, who suffered food poisoning in the last episode, is back up on her feet, and that means it is time for another operation. As you remember, we recently acquired a psychic harmonizer, and we are now going to install this one on colony founder Steak. The effect will basically be that as long as Steak is in a good mood, all the other colonists around him will also receive a small mood bonus. Nothing crazy, just a +2 or +3 if I remember correctly, but I anticipate this to be a rather permanent thing, and all in all I think it will do far more good than harm. Outside of the colony then, Red Hawk also discovers a lone iguana, so before she starts the operation she can quickly go hunting, and then it's time to do some chopping. And there we go, the surgery has been a success, the psychic harmonizer has been installed, and so, again, as long as we keep Steak happy, the rest of the colony should feel a little bit better as well. Now, moving on, we will do something that might surprise one or two of you, as we will, after quite some time, let Alistair out of his cryptosleep casket. Yes, he will remain paralyzed for the next 37 days, but still, this way he can at least start to recover, while inside of the casket he is utterly useless to us. As far as I know, he is added to the colony wealth either way, so we might as well start moving in the right direction with him. We should have enough food at this point to keep him fed, and we don't really have to worry about mental breaks either, because, well, he's paralyzed after all. A short while later then, the eclipse that has been bothering us since the beginning of the episode is finally ending, and we are deconstructing our butcher table. Of course, not because we no longer need it, but simply because it's made of steel, and that resource is shaping up to be our bottleneck for the next few episodes, so as long as we can construct a wooden alternative, I think we should save all that we can. As the evening rolls around, we are then also offered a quest, and this one may be a tough choice. First things first here, the reward is absolutely fantastic, as the Psi-Link Neuroformer would allow a second colonist to obtain psychic abilities. However, 3 sleeping mechanoids as well as another unknown threat that seems potentially dangerous, and I don't really think that we're equipped to face more than 1, maybe 2 of them at the moment, at least not as long as we are the attackers. So I'll have to think about this one for a moment. In the meantime, we can watch Red Hawk mine some more steel, and then the day slowly comes to a close. However, the events don't stop. At night, we not only learn that our donkey Froome is pregnant, we also have a group of grizzly bears cross the desert, and you know what that means, it's time to go hunting. I think Jake and Steak, our dynamic duo, should suffice, and while we're sending them out, we can also prepare a caravan, because we have accumulated a bit of stuff that I want to get rid of. To increase carrying capacity and with that movement speed, we will send out Red Hawk with Alpaca modified, and the 2 of them will now gather some drugs, some pigskin and plenty of tribal weaponry. All of this is stuff that we acquired in the last raid, and we have absolutely no use for it. While Red Hawk is packing her bags, Jake and Steak have successfully intercepted the bears. However, things don't go quite as planned. One could also say that I was way too optimistic here. In any case, all 5 bears turn manhunter before we can land even a single kill, and so we're now running back to the base. Unfortunately, the bears are a tiny bit faster, so we have to use a few charges of Steak's burden ability to slow them down. In the end, it is still a very close call, but as you can see, our gates shut right in front of the animals. While all of that is going on, we also have some cargo pods drop in. Inside, a good amount of guinea pig fur, as well as of course the steel slag chunks, none of which will be brought back to the base at this point, however, as we have a few bigger issues to take care of first. Pete's patented peekaboo works like a charm though. One of the bears already succumbed to its injuries earlier, and here you can see the second one fall. A few moments later then, number 3, 4 and 5 go down. Alpaca Modified has already calmly walked past all the carnage, and Red Hawk can now follow suit, safely leave the map and start her trading journey. Back in the base meanwhile, it is time for the potato harvest and also for the beginning of some construction work. We can once again obtain some steel by deconstructing the wall over here, however we will replace it with limestone in just a moment. Red Hawk's caravan meanwhile has already safely reached her destination, and again we have brought a few things to sell. For drugs, weapons and pigskin we can obtain over 500 silver, and our friends of the Black Troska tribe don't really have much to offer in return, so we will just grab as much steel as we can carry and then head back home. Back home meanwhile, it is time for some more cooking as another night sets in. You can see that our freezer is filled to capacity and we also have plenty of hay, so I think it's a smart idea to make some room in the kitchen. More good news then as we learn that Labrador Noosa is also pregnant once again, and with that good news our colony heads off to bed and we can skip ahead to the next morning. And on that next morning it is kibble making time. If we don't put them in the freezer quickly, our bear corpses will rot in just a few days, and our animal food supply is also slowly diminishing, so let's make some more and clear some space. A little while later then we have some good news from Troy, who has just finished his research of deep drilling. This will now allow us to mine out underground mineral deposits. However, to actually find those, we also need to have a ground-penetrating scanner, so that is what we'll have to research next. Apart from that, the day progresses in a fairly uneventful manner. Around noon, our small caravan returns. As you can see, our dogs have also mostly cleared out the cargo pod crash site already, and so we slowly progress into the afternoon. At this point, we also have to make a decision regarding that quest we received earlier, and as much as I'm itching to go for the risky approach here, we're not taking it. Like I said, we want to do some building today, and to complete this quest we would likely have to send out a good chunk of our colonists, which would leave our base largely defenseless, and I'm not willing to take that risk. In the near future, when we have drop pods of our own, things might look differently, but for now I think it's best if we play it safe here. The afternoon then passes by uneventfully. In the evening we can see the results of a large rice harvest, but that is about the most exciting thing that happens, at least for the time being. On the next morning then, you can already see it, it's construction time. And don't worry, we're not making our storage room even smaller than it already is. Once this entire project is finished, we should actually have more space than we currently have. And while our builders are busy, we can watch Red Hawk mine some steel and then later on also some components. There are a few items that we're planning to build today that require those, and it's also always a good idea to have a few spare ones lying around. Back in the base meanwhile, our two new rooms at the top here are mostly finished. We are now also giving them both a slight extension northwards, sacrificing 2 or 3 cotton plants in the process, but those will eventually move to hydroponics basins anyway, and as you can see, we still have plenty of them growing. Once that work is done, the room on the right will then receive a bunch of wooden shelves, because we will be storing some stuff here, and neatly storing that on shelves will keep the room cleaned up and looking nice and beautiful. And look at that, we even have a masterwork shelf among the 4 of them. Not that this really has any sort of major benefit, but it's nice to see that Steak can apparently pump those out with some regularity. And playing it safe with the quest earlier then also pays off just a few moments later, as we have a potentially big problem on our hands. A mech cluster has arrived, and this one does pack a bit of a punch. Not only do our enemies have an automatically firing mortar cannon, but there are also 2 pikemen, 1 lancer, 4 large and 3 small turrets, not to mention some defensive structures as well. Now, the entire setup is currently dormant, save for the mortar, and even though that thing is pretty inaccurate, it could potentially hit any part of our base, which means we have to act fast. As you can imagine though, we will not be able to destroy the mortar without taking care of the mechanoids first, and let's fight fire with fire here and man our own mortar. Now ideally we're hitting the green glowing unstable power cell here, as that has the potential to take out both a mech and a mortar. However, keep in mind that our mortar is not the most accurate either. And indeed, the shot goes wide, but it does hit the enemy structure, which means the mechanoids have now woken up. It also looks like they are moving towards our base now, which is actually exactly where we want them to go. Still, as our colony gets ready for the attack, let's take one more shot here and see if we get lucky. Alright, not really the kind of luck I wanted, but we'll take it. 1 enemy turret has been destroyed and the mechanoids are already here, so let's not waste any more mortar shells and instead fend off the attack. Conveniently enough, the lancer rushes ahead of the group and it's dark outside and raining, so accuracy on both sides is pretty horrible, but we definitely have the numbers advantage, and so our first enemy falls relatively quickly. The slow-moving pikemen are up next and they won't go down quite as easily. Still, it is 2 of them against 9 of our turrets and 3 colonists, so I am cautiously optimistic. What I am much more worried about though is the mechanoid mortar cannon, because while we're fighting here, that thing will get off at least 1 shot, and with just a bit of bad luck we could lose something, or even worse, someone very important. Thankfully though, with the first rays of sunlight here we managed to destroy the 3rd mechanoid. So far our base also has not suffered any damages, and let's do our best here to keep it that way. After all, the danger is far from over. Our main priority at this point is of course the enemy mortar, and for that one we will simply have Edmo equip his shield belt and then run over there. Yes, he is going in with no other protection, but if we're approaching from the south then he should be fine. There is only a single small turret that can fire in that direction, and the shield belt should be able to take 1 or 2 hits and get him safely into position. And indeed, Edmo makes it over to the mortar in 1 piece. Thanks to the structures that our enemies themselves have built, he can also not be targeted in this position, which means he can now use his hand talent to hack away at the mortar. The gun would be quicker, but of course he can't use that while he has the shield belt equipped. It also looks like this is going to be a very close call. The mortar is just seconds away from being able to fire again. Let's see if Edmo can take it out before that happens. Okay, that was pretty much just a split second there. Had we arrived just a moment later, I think another projectile would have been fired. This way, however, the 2 most dangerous components of this mech cluster have now been defeated, and before we take on the rest, I think it's time for Edmo to get some sleep. He has been awake all night and the other colonists are all already resting, so let's send him back home. After all, there is no immediate threat at the moment. However, make no mistake about it, we do of course want to take care of the entire situation quickly. But first, we have something a bit more fortunate happen. With our steel supply getting smaller, the crashing down of a steel meteorite certainly comes in handy. And of course, we will have Red Hawk mine that one out as soon as possible. First of all though, it is Jake's turn to shine. He is already in his marine armor and will now also equip Edmo's shield belt. And, because we have some destruction to do, he will also grab Troy's grenades. With all of that in hand, he will then take the same route that Edmo did earlier, running towards the mech cluster from the south to avoid enemy fire. Now, unfortunately, he can also not throw any grenades while he has the shield belt equipped, so for the time being we will have to drop that. Then we will slowly inch closer towards the turret on the right here, until we are in a position where the grenade's blast radius allows us to destroy the turret without putting Jake himself into the line of fire. And there we go, that is one turret down, and we will now basically repeat this for the remaining ones, although especially those 4 up in the top right could prove to be a bit more difficult. Now for the one we're currently targeting, you can see that we have aimed at a spot where the turret is theoretically safe. However, as you can also see, grenades do not always land perfectly in the center of where we aim, and so it should only be a matter of time before a throw goes a bit too far off to the right and destroys the turret. And just like that. Now at this point things could become a bit tricky, so let's first put the shield back on and then move a bit closer. Once we have arrived at our spot, we will then drop the shield again, and in hindsight, yes, we could have skipped this step. The most important thing, however, is that we do once again seem to have a good spot here, and so shortly after we're down to only 3 turrets remaining. Now to clear our path, we will have to get this boulder here out of the way. Unfortunately then, we have no other choice but to briefly expose ourselves to hit the next turret, and even though the grenade throw is perfectly on point, so is one of the turret's shots, and despite his suit of armor, Jake suffers an injury. Now, at least for the time being, that is nothing life-threatening, and we thankfully do not have to expose him any further to take care of the remaining 2 turrets, which, as you can see, does take a while, but is eventually crowned with success. And there we are, the Mech Cluster has been defeated and its remains are now up to us to salvage. And there is also no need to destroy any more of the items around. Instead, we can start deconstructing them for resources and then send Jake back to the base to get some treatment. His body stake, meanwhile, is already heading out. After all of these walls are steel walls, and after 30 episodes in the desert, one thing is clear, you can never have enough of that. Back in the base, meanwhile, Troy finishes his research of the ground-penetrating scanner, so in theory we now have all that we need to extract minerals from underground. Jake's wounds are also quickly patched up by our resident Dr. Redhawk, while Edmo is already busy making meals again, this time hopefully without attempting to poison anyone. As the night is fully setting across the desert, we then also have the Royal Tribute Collector arrive, but as always we have no prisoners to give them and our gold would barely make a difference, and unless anything changes about that, they will eventually leave again empty-handed. Now that pretty much concludes the day. There is one thing we didn't get to see in all the action though, and that is that our supply of alpaca wool has grown a bit. Yes, we can shear the 2 of them from time to time, and I assume exactly that has happened at some point during the attack. Now, on the next morning, it is first time for Edmo to craft himself a new cowboy hat. His old one was getting a bit tattered, but all in all, that is a task quickly completed. Afterwards, he can then quickly disassemble the 3 mechanoids, which again do no longer give as many resources as they used to. As a matter of fact, we only receive 34 units of steel from 3 enemies here. That is not even the amount needed for a single steel spike trap, and so I remain of the opinion that this is an aspect of the game that could certainly receive a small boost. Nonetheless, let's not complain and instead focus on our next research project, as up next we are looking into hospital beds. More and more frequently, we have people spend a day or 2 in our hospital recovering from minor injuries, and a proper, good quality hospital bed could speed up that time a bit, not to mention that it would also boost the quality of the medical treatment received, which all helps to get our colonists back up on their feet quicker. Now at this point you can see we already have a good amount of steel, and for a change, as you can see here, we also have plenty more coming in, so we can comfortably rearm all of our turrets, before we then move on to the second step in our construction process. You may have already guessed it, the 2 rooms we have built up here are going to be our new kitchen and our new butchering room. For some increased efficiency, we will also have a tailoring bench right next to the butcher table, although again at the moment we are lacking a dedicated crafter, and so we really only use it when we need to, but hopefully that changes in the future. Especially in the kitchen, the new setup now has the advantage of storing our food items on shelves, which means they no longer carry a hefty beauty penalty, and eventually I think we'll implement something similar for the butchering/tailoring room as well. The big final step, however, that we have yet to take, that is our storage room, as we can now clear some space below the 2 rooms for what will be our temporary main storage room. Eventually though, and that is why we moved the whole setup in the first place, I want it to be the place where we store all the product from the hydroponics farms, so primarily rice and eventually cotton as well. And for that I think it makes sense to reverse the entire setup, so that there is a clear path from the fields to the storage room and eventually to the kitchen. However, the setup is of course not completed yet after just moving things around a bit. We also have to get some floor smoothing done to at least give the place a minimum of aesthetic quality, and then the 2 most important additions are the recently unlocked comms console as well as an orbital trade beacon. Both items together will not only allow us to call trade caravans from allied factions, but to also do business with traders in spaceships, which tend to carry a few more interesting items compared to our friends of the Black Troska tribe. If you're wondering, by the way, why we have not yet started deep drilling, then the problem can be seen right here. For the ground-penetrating scanner we need 1 advanced component, and we currently don't have one and also can't make one ourselves, which is also part of the reason why the comms console and the orbital trade beacon are important, as those offer easy ways to obtain those from traders. Now, despite the construction work, we still have a bit more steel left in storage, so let's quickly construct 3 more hydroponics basins before the sun fully sets. Those will be used to further increase our rice production. After all, we do have 1 more mouth to feed compared to the last episode, and having a bit of extra food certainly hasn't hurt anyone yet. During the evening, our colony then remains productive. Redhawk is smelting some of the steel from the mechanoid cluster, and Admo is making kibble to clear some more space inside of our freezer. On the next morning then, Redhawk goes to work on that steel meteorite that dropped earlier. A few hours later, we can watch her chop limestone blocks for further construction projects, while Steak is spending his time making some art, slowly increasing his skills on that front. Speaking of skills, we can take a quick look at Jake and Admo here as well. And you can see, apart from his love for animals and shooting things, Jake is also becoming a competent gardener, while Admo remains arguably one of the most well-rounded colonists we have. Ideally though, we soon find someone who can either take over the cooking or the crafting jobs, because as you once again saw this episode, our crops are only expanding, and so turning Admo into more of a full-time plant worker could have its advantages. In the evening then, Steak finishes his small sculpture. It is of good quality and named Image for Torture. The description speaks of weavers and clerics eating turnips together. Not the most tortureful image in my opinion, but we'll place it down in front of our prison anyway, and at the same time we can also get rid of some of our flower pots. At this point in the game they do produce a good amount of work with a comparatively small reward. And so, with another night setting across the desert, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut for today. I think we once again made some good progress, and as promised, as we wrap things up here, I once again have some artwork for you. Our friend Tofu once again produced something amazing. Unfortunately, his message got lost in the shuffle a bit, as this image of Jake and Steak on a caravan trip refers to an event that already happened a few episodes ago. Nonetheless, I think it's more than worth showing off, so thank you Tofu once again, and I think I can speak for all of us if I say, feel free to keep those coming. And that's it for today. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.